Hi, welcome back to Fringe Pop 321. I'm your host, Aaron Judkins, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. Today's episode is Göbekli Tepe in the Ice Age. For an ice age to occur, you need warmer oceans and a huge amount of precipitation. So we know from the book of Genesis that the fountains of the great deep burst forth, releasing a lot of lava underneath the ocean that warmed up the water. Now this caused violent supersonic jet streams to shoot up through the cracks in the basaltic rock. Some geologists estimate that it went up to 200 miles high in the stratosphere. Basaltic rock has a high calcium content, so lots of calcium was being added to the ocean water, and this caused a loss of atmospheric pressure in the earth that resulted in a lot of carbon dioxide being released in the ocean water. It's much like unscrewing the cap on a 2-liter bottle of Sprite. So you have calcium in the water mixed with carbon dioxide, and then that equates to calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is limey mud, and that limey mud was being washed up onto the land in tidal waves during the flood of Noah's day. Now this caused a rapid burial of the sea creatures. So warmer ocean that produced a higher evaporation, and that caused torrential downpours that was already in a colder climate and a lot of snowfall in the mid and higher latitudes. This would have caused a climate change by a volcanic winter. So this volcanic activity decreased the temperatures up to 30 degrees. And a significant amount of rainfall in the lower latitudes and heavy snowfall and ice in the northern latitudes on the colder continents. This is the very precipitation for the Ice Age. Now, numerous simulations have been done on precipitation in the polar regions, and they used a conventional climate model with warm sea surface temperatures, and they have demonstrated that ice sheets thousands of feet thick could have been accumulated in less than 500 years. Now some of these ice sheets are up to 10,000 feet thick. So we have all these eruptions and explosions, a pollution of some 10,000 volcanoes that are spewing into the atmosphere, and the poles froze. This caused the animals in the far north to be overwhelmed with a very sudden flash freeze. This would explain how woolly mammoths and other Ice Age animals were suddenly buried with fresh tropical vegetation still in their stomachs. Now, at normal body temperatures, enzymes begin to break down the proteins within about an hour. This evidence would indicate temperatures of about 50 degrees Fahrenheit or more while alive. Why? Because we see the bacteria in these mammoths that are still alive. Studies have shown that the outer layers of skin would have at least a temperature drop to minus 175 degrees Fahrenheit to preserve these stomach contents and their flesh. These are not fossilized animals, they are mummified. So just for the record, there's evidence right here in North America in the state of Colorado, and it's called the Snowmass Village Site. It's one of the most significant fossil discoveries in Colorado history. This discovery is unique because there are no known sites in Colorado, just a few in North America, that contain both mammoth and mastodon fossils in one location. And it's the most complete mammoth fossil sites ever discovered at this highest elevation in Colorado of 8,870 feet, in which mastodons and giant ground sloths have been found together. So what better model to explain the mammoth megasites in large numbers being buried with other animals in the same place at the same time? Now, it's scientifically possible to try to resurrect a mammoth. Why? Because they're so intact. Just in case if you're wondering about a dinosaur, it's not genetically possible to do that. Contrary to probably what you've heard, according to a study published in Nature, researchers have calculated that the DNA only has a half-life of 521 years. Yeah, you heard that right, 521 years. That means that after 521 years, the half-life of the bonds between the nucleotides have degraded, and then another 521 years, those remaining bonds have degraded, and then in another 521 years, half of that's gone. So the team has predicted that even under ideal preservation conditions and temperatures of, say, minus 5 degrees Celsius, every bond is destroyed after a maximum of 6.8 million years, not 65 million years old as we've been told from the dinosaurs. Now, creation geologists agree that there was only one major ice age following the Noahic deluge, not four. Now, the standard for the creation model for the ice age is Michael Ord's work, and he calculates an estimated time frame of the ice age lasting about 500 to 700 years. So after the flood occurs, some 500 years later, we reach a glacial maximum event with an average snowfall depth of 2,300 feet in the northern hemispheres and about 4,000 feet in Antarctica, with a total length of time of about 700 years on average. Now, many evolutionists have believed that humans didn't migrate to the Americas until after the Ice Age, but new evidence has thrown a wrench in this theory. A recent scientific or science article reports that scientists have found ancient footprints that indicate humans lived here in North America before the Ice Age ended. And of course, in my research, I've visited numerous archaeological sites. Mammoth Hot Springs, or the Mammoth site in Hot Springs, South Dakota, and then the sudden death site, Mammoth site in Waco, Texas, where a bull mammoth was buried, attempting to raise a juvenile mammoth up on his tusk while being buried in the mud. Now, a lot of you may remember my colleague, Dr. Joe Taylor. He molded that entire site at the sudden death site in Waco in situ in 1988. And you can now see it. It's on display at the New Mayburn Museum on the north side of the Baylor campus in Waco, Texas. Another site that I can bring your attention to is Blackwater Draw Site near Clovis, New Mexico. Now, this site is associated with the remains of an extinct late Pleistocene megafauna. This includes the mammoths, camels, horses, bison, saber-toothed cats, sloths, dire wolves, and these are all animals that were hunted by these people who lived at the site. Now, generations of people lived there. They hunted there, they camped there at Blackwater Draw, and there's levels of stratification in archaeology that we can go back and we can look from many different time periods, including the Clovis and the Folsom and the Midland time period. The site is really well known for its defined zones that exhibit these numerous cultural sequences. So towards the end of the Pleistocene period, the climate begins to change. We have warmer and drier weather. This caused the water in the region to really decrease, and they lost their water sources. So the Younger Dryas boundary is clearly identified in this area by the megafaunal remains of Clovis artifacts. Now, it is an interesting discovery that was made, and it was published by a research article by Earth and Atmospheric and Planetary Sciences, that Folsom artifacts were found above this archaeological gap zone that's about 10 to 20 centimeters thick, and it lies immediately above this Clovis layer. This is a culturally dead zone, which extends across about 157-acre site, and it has no Folsom artifacts in contact with Clovis artifacts. This means that this is a post-Clovis occupational hiatus for up to 600 years. So what does this mean? This archaeological gap is consistent with a proposed population decline in the late Pleistocene epoch. This 600-year gap dovetails with Michael Ord's Ice Age model, lasting between 500 and 700 years after the flood. Then you have the Younger Dryas event, which had catastrophic effects around the globe, and this may also help to explain why the mammoths went extinct about 2100 BC. And the inhabitants of Göbekli Tepe had completely abandoned the site within about the same time frame as we see with the Younger Dryas event. So this all dovetails with the creation model, the Noahic flood deluge, the record of the mammoths being buried in Colorado, the record of the sudden death site, the Waco sudden death site in Waco, Texas, and the Clovis site, which has this archaeological gap. That's about 600 years. This all coincides with the biblical time frame of 500 to 700 years after the flood, and it coincides with the inhabitants and the abandonment of Göbekli Tepe about the same time period. Hey, thanks for joining us today on today's episode of Fringe Pop 321. And remember, what you know may not be so.